This is SlimeVR. Not anymore. It's been exactly 2 years since I've last looked at official SlimeVR hardware, and a lot has changed. This is what their trackers looked like before, and this is what they look like now. These are SlimeVR's new butterfly trackers, and they might just be the ideal form factor for an IMU tracker. They're small, light, and quite literally flexible. Not only has the hardware improved, but the software and user experience have as well. Quick disclaimer, SlimeVR did send me this kit for free. Obviously, butterfly trackers aren't out yet, so not everything here is final. For stuff like tracking quality or the software, that doesn't matter a ton. I was sent a bunch of stuff, but not all of it will be included or even officially sold. Of all the stuff I got, anything you buy will include the trackers, the straps, the dongle with a cradle for it, and some extra Velcro pads. Things like the charging dock or belt clips are available as add-ons. Other stuff like this carrying case or a wall hanger for the straps won't be officially sold, but there are 3D print files available for them. Speaking of 3D printing, everything here is 3D printed. The final hardware will actually be injection molded. Other changes between my hardware and the final hardware is that my dongle looks a lot different. My dock only holds 8 trackers instead of the full 10, and then the trackers themselves are still going to go through a few more revisions before they get sent out to you. Butterflies are so much smaller than regular slimes. You wear them closer to your body than not only those older slimes, but also pretty much any other tracker as well. They also fold, which helps them physically mold themselves to your body. It's a very unique form factor where half of the tracker is the battery and the other half is everything else. They're definitely the flattest tracker out there when unfolded, but they are still a bit wider than something like a Flux Pose or a Rebo Cap. If you want, you can actually fold butterflies over on themselves and use them like that. This way, they're definitively smaller than Rebo Cap, but honestly about the same size as Flux Pose. I personally think it makes the most sense to just use them unfolded since they're the most comfy that way. They also mount differently than any other tracker since they have Velcro built right onto the back of them. Even if you're using them with straps, you kinda just slap them on them instead of trying to have to loop them through. I was sent a bunch of extra Velcro stickers, which lets me attach them to pretty much anything. For example, there's also belt clips you can buy, which instead of wearing the tracker on a strap, you can just clip it straight to your clothes. This is mainly for the waist tracker, but I'm sure you could make it work elsewhere too. The straps also got a really nice change. Now they have a clip on them. Instead of having to fumble around with Velcro every single time you put your trackers on or take them off, you only need to mess with the Velcro once to fit the straps to your body, and then clip them on and off. They also come in wide and thin variants now. I highly recommend getting the thin straps for both the elbow tracker and the feet trackers, since that isn't what the kits default to for some reason. I do really wish that the longer straps for the chest and waist also came in thin variants, but they sadly don't. If you're expecting a big jump in tracking quality between butterflies and regular slimes, don't. They use the same ICM 45686 IMUs as the 1.2 slimes do, so the drift times are exactly the same. The tracking quality is also exactly the same. I mean, they use the same IMU, run on the same software, and can even be used in tandem, so like, what do you expect? Now, I'm sure y'all want some tracking comparisons between slime tracking and positional tracking like with Flux Pose or Vive 3.0s, so here you go. Some things to keep in mind while this all plays out. I chose to compare the Flux Pose Light Kit, which is the equivalent to 3 Lighthouse or Vive Ultimates, to wearing 8 butterflies. 8 IMU trackers is what you need to be able to do certain motions you can do with only 3 positional trackers, so it works out. Foot rotation is the big one. It lets you actually get on your tiptoes and stuff like that. I think it's a fair comparison since the butterfly kit with 10 trackers is actually about the same price as the Flux Pose Light Kit, so using only 8 butterflies is even cheaper. Having the chest and knee trackers does obviously make certain things look better. I also chose to leave off elbows since obviously having elbow trackers looks better than not having them, but more so because the way I recorded this was treating them very weirdly. This footage was not recorded in VR chat. I wore both sets of trackers at the same time and then piped that into Warudo with VMC, meaning I can guarantee this is a true one-to-one comparison. VRChat's tracker handling systems are a lot better looking in my opinion, so things actually look a bit better in game. You can see some slight differences looking from the outside in like this, but I'd be willing to bet a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell the difference when not actively trying to figure out what you're using. Overall, both follow body movements very well. Also, keep in mind VRChat applies additional smoothing, so this is the worst some of this stuff will look. From the inside out, it is definitely a lot easier to see a difference. Positional trackers basically pin themselves to your body, whereas SlimeVR does not. It estimates position by applying the rotation of trackers on your body to a model of a skeleton. I don't think the accuracy is bad though. It's off by a bit, but I personally don't notice it unless I'm sitting in a green screen world with pass-through on actively looking for it. Like, are positional trackers better? In a lot of cases, yeah. But I think it's really important to keep price in mind when answering that question. You can't get elbow, chest, or knee tracking for the price of slimes with positional tracking. You also don't need to get the full 8 or 10 trackers with slimes. You could just get a kit of 6, which is quite a bit cheaper. Now, I personally never use less than 8 trackers, and if you can afford 8, you really should go for it. Honestly, it's what I use most of the time anyways, because I really hate wearing elbow trackers. If all you can afford is 6 trackers though, and you really want full body tracking, it's still a good option. Now, one thing you should know, and probably do know if you've ever looked into slime, is that the trackers drift over time. I'm gonna be so real. 2 years ago, I thought people who complained about drift had never used a SlimeVR tracker right, if they had even ever used one at all. Nowadays, I think that even more. First of all, drift is not your limbs like physically flying away off into the distance. It's them being rotated wrong. What happens is that the tracker thinks it's rotated more than it actually has. On my old B&O slimes, it took me like 35 to 40 minutes before I needed to recalibrate. And by recalibrate, I mean do a yaw reset, where you face forward and tap on your chest tracker a few times. It takes like 2 seconds, and you don't even need to be standing up to do it. On the newer IMUs and butterflies, that time has increased to about an hour. Except you can actually bring it closer to 2 hours using a new feature called Stay Aligned. Where drift is most noticeable is in your waist and chest trackers, because one of those being off affects literally every other tracker below it. Well, what Stay Aligned does is just nudges those trackers to face forward again when it detects you're in a good position to do that with. It seems so trivial, but it works so well. Now, I'm not saying drift isn't a problem, because it is a very real drawback of these trackers. I just think people tend to blow it way out of proportion. Now, obviously, I'm not a dancer or anyone else doing movements that are like really bad for IMU trackers. I tend to sit around, lay around, jump full force into my beanbag, run around my play space, or act like an idiot on my floor. I'm much more of a casual full body tracking user. I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're not a pole dancer, then don't listen to the opinions of pole dancers, right? For casual usage, which is what most people on VR chat are using full body for, let's be real, drift really isn't that big of a problem. If you don't want to deal with drift, then you simply have to suck it up and spend more money, since every single budget solution on the market right now has it, and in my opinion, SlimeVR not only just has less of it, it also handles it the best. There's also a lot of stuff people mistake for drift that isn't actually drift. Stuff like doing the calibration poses wrong, or wearing the trackers wrong, or just not having your proportions set correctly. Back in the day, it was really hard to set all of this stuff up if you were trying to just rely on the SlimeVR server software. Nowadays, it's actually gotten a lot better. It actually walks you through the poses you need to do, complete with graphics to show you what's right and what's wrong. It tells you the order you need to do things in, and it can even tell you if you have bad VR chat settings set. Other aspects have been simplified. Take body proportions, for example. Back in the day, you used to need to do a little dance to try and get them calculated. A lot of people were really bad at that. Now it's just the average based on your height. The old option is still there for anyone who wants to use it. It's what I personally use since I think it works a little bit better, but I do think it's really important that you don't need to do it anymore to get usable tracking. I do think it's still worth seeking out external resources. The server has come a long way, but a lot is still missing from it. SlimeVR's Discord server is really good about helping people out if you need it, and they also host weekly meetups in VR chat for you to go and get help live if you want. I guess I should probably talk a bit more about the butterfly hardware itself, huh? All the software and tracking quality stuff applies to pretty much any SlimeVR compatible tracker, provided it's using a similar IMU. Butterflies do have a lot more hardware changes that are very different from older DIY designs, but especially the old first-party design. It seems like they've changed the Velcro on the straps to make it so they don't get stuck together in a giant blob that made charging the trackers hell on earth. Charging was my least favorite part about original Slimes, not only because the straps kinda sucked, but also because every single tracker needed its own USB-C cable. Well, with butterflies, you can actually get a dock that can charge multiple trackers with just one cable. It's very unique compared to other docks out there. First of all, it just uses USB-C, so you aren't forced into owning and using it if you don't want to. Second, the trackers fit into it while they're still on their straps, which makes things significantly less annoying. There's also a USB-A port built into it if you want to plug your dongle into it. Now, I don't think it's necessarily perfect. Since it's USB-C, it takes a lot more force to get the trackers in and out of it than something like a magnetic connector or pogo pins would. It also doesn't offer a way to turn the trackers on and off, which is one of my favorite parts of both the FluxPose and ReboCap docks. I do think $50 for it is also a little bit steep. Overall, though, it's definitely a big improvement over old Slimes. What isn't, though, is the power button. I have beef with it right now because to turn the trackers off, you don't just press and hold. You have to press and hold until the light starts blinking yellow and then release. If you press and hold for too long, the trackers go into a different mode and don't turn off. I just don't want to have to pay attention to my trackers while I'm trying to turn them off. Well, I have been told that this should be changed before release, so hopefully they actually change it. Now that I've spent forever complaining about a power button, let's look at something that can be a huge improvement for some people. How they connect to your device. So older Slimes use Wi-Fi to connect, which is all fine and good if you have a good environment for it. It wasn't uncommon for some people to end up having to buy a dedicated router just for their Slimes to work correctly. Well, that isn't a problem with butterflies since now they use a dongle. Each dongle lets you connect up to 10 trackers, and you can even plug multiple into your computer. Similarly to Vive 3.0 trackers, you can't just plug the dongle straight into a USB port since that usually causes interference. Fortunately, the dongle does come with a cradle to help circumvent that. Pairing trackers to the dongle is also a lot easier than the old plug a tracker in, unplug it, plug a tracker in, unplug it that you had to do with the Wi-Fi. One downside is that Wi-Fi does just have longer range. My 2.4 GHz network spans my entire house, whereas this dongle does not. Now, I have a pretty big play space and I haven't had any problems with the trackers not being able to connect to it, so I wouldn't really worry about this unless you're someone who plays VR in a different room than your computer's in. You could just run a USB extension cable into it, though. A massive benefit of ditching Wi-Fi is battery life. Butterflies can get like 48 hours of it. That is over double what old Slimes got, despite the battery being physically smaller. Now, do you necessarily need that much battery? Probably not, but it does mean you have to charge them less, which I certainly appreciate. Unfortunately, butterflies are a bit more expensive than regular Slimes. Not only can you not get kits of 5 anymore, the smallest is 6, which I wholeheartedly agree with, by the way, because it makes a very big difference. But the kit of 6 on butterflies is just more expensive than the older one. This probably has something to do with the hardware being a bit more complex and the fact you need the new dongle. If you already have a set of slimes though, whether those be first-party ones or third-party ones, they do just work with butterflies, so you don't necessarily need to buy a whole new set. If I was looking to make an upgrade, I would swap all my extensions for butterflies, and then also my elbow trackers. Yeah, my elbow trackers, that I don't use half the time anyways. And in case you're wondering, everything about SlimeVR is still open source. If you just want smaller trackers with crazy battery life that also connect with a dongle, well, there's already some third-party sellers who can offer that for you. As always, if you want to buy third-party trackers, make sure the seller has a listing in SlimeVR's Discord marketplace first. So should you buy butterfly trackers? Well, if you're already on some other kind of slime and you're happy with them, then why would you? But if you think you'd like the form factor, then yeah, go for it. If you're someone who doesn't have any trackers at all, I do think butterflies are a better choice over not only the older slimes, but also pretty much any other IMU tracker out there. Now don't get me wrong, something like ReboCap can offer really good value for your money if you need a lot of tracking points, but it also just drifts more than slime does. Now, if it's worth it to buy slimes over a positional solution is really just up to preference. With slime, you can max out your points of tracking in VR for the cost of the bare minimum amount of trackers you need with a positional solution. As a trade-off, those more expensive solutions are more accurate and don't drift. I think it can still be worth it to get slimes, provided you're willing to put in the effort to learn how to use them well, since if you do that, they can still be pretty decently accurate. If you're interested, the crowd supply is linked in the description. Do keep in mind, slime is famously bad at giving shipping dates. They say they're gonna start shipping in August, but I don't believe them for 1 second. I would love to be proven wrong though. Overall, I think butterflies are a really cool piece of hardware. Sure, they aren't better than something like Lighthouse trackers or FluxPose tracking quality-wise, but they aren't trying to be. They're trying to provide low form factor, usable full body tracking at an attainable price, which they do very well. I think it's really cool that something like this exists, because back when I was first getting into VR, the only budget option was something like a Kinect, and that definitely worked quite a bit worse than slimes do.